Well, he was the CEO of Massmart, and now he's the executive chairman of NRG Renew Africa. Grant Pattison is in the studio to talk about why the energy company has just bought Kayema Energy. Evening to you, Grant. We've had lots of chats together when you were at Massmart, usually in a suit, standing up, sitting down and so on, now in a t-shirt with the new branding on. There's a note in your press release, and I haven't heard of either of these companies, where you say, in the end, everyone with a large roof is a potential client or partner to NRG, and you're supplying energy solutions. So who are these people that need your help?
So specifically what that statement's referring to is that South Africa has a massive solar reserve. We are blessed with our sun. And therefore, anyone who's got a roof has got an opportunity to put solar panels on it, and anyone who's got those opportunities can become a producer of energy. And we are a utility company. We're an independent power producer, which refers to the fact we're not owned by a state. It's an independent company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, a Fortune 250 company. And we can partner with anyone with a big roof, generate electricity, either sell it back to them at a cheaper price or perhaps sell it elsewhere.
If this is done all over South Africa, you could generate a great deal of electricity. You must have done some kind of estimates of what you could contribute to the national grid.
Yes, South Africa has a massive potential. Already, the Department of Energy is quite far down this track, and figures of 10 gig potential. That's obviously on farmland, not on the roofs. So it's a big 10 gig relates to the installed capacity of Eskom of about 40 gigawatts. On roofs, we think there's a potential of about 5 gigawatts across the South African market. So it's not a Kusile, but it's clean energy. It's close to the demand centers and is a massive opportunity for South Africa.
Now the company says it offers a mix of resources, and it goes right through, as far as I can see, from coal, wind, all the opportunities that there. But you say the focus is on solar in South Africa.
Yes, back in the United States, it's a traditional utility, again independently owned. So it has plants that do nuclear and coal and gas and the normal mix of utility. But it's over the last 5 years built up 5 gigawatts in the US of renewable energy production. And so it's that bit, the renewable energy bit, that's been attracted to the South African market and the opportunities here and on the continent.
Now, as I say, I don't know the companies. NRG Energy, that's the listed company. Then there's a local version of that, and you've bought another company. So tell us about that deal.
Yeah, so we announced NRG Renew's entry to the market. So that's the
NRG Renew is a subsidiary of NRG Energy.
Correct. And NRG Renew is an American company, and they've with me started up a South African company called NRG Renew Africa. Now that company will focus on the renewable market, both utility and what we call corporate and industrial customers, so factories and head offices and big residential roofs. And we've just bought a company called Kayema, which is really an energy services company who over the last 5 years have been servicing many of the big clients in South Africa in energy audits and energy efficiency consulting. And so we intend to extend their skill base into building power plants, owning them and running them. Also,
from what you say here, it's the idea of building small power plants to service particular companies. So sounds like a very big generator that you're talking about.
Correct. In fact, you pick up one of the biggest trends worldwide. As you know, we're rather distracted here by load shedding and building of power plants. But throughout the world, there's a huge shift going from centralized generation of energy, big power plants, long transmission lines. And there's a shift towards what's called distributed or embedded generation, where you put the generator closer to the load. And that type of system is more flexible and perhaps cheaper to run.
So now you're an electrical engineer, which I think a lot of people when you were working at Massmart didn't realize. Now you're back to your core knowledge, if you like. So what have you done since Massmart, and how did you get into this?
Well, just in case it's misleading, I studied electrical engineering. I did pass, and I passed well.
You didn't become one?
I'm not a registered electrical engineer, but I did study power engineering. In fact, interestingly, I did my thesis in solar battery charging. So this really is a big 360 for me. But yeah, after I left Massmart, I took some time off, sorted out my personal affairs. These tend to drift when one's managing other people's money. And during that process, got introduced by some good friends to the NRG folk back in California. And so I've got to know them well, and they're coming to invest.
So what are they looking for from you here? I mean, you know South Africa, but you don't necessarily know the energy market despite your original training.
Yeah, so they know the energy market. I don't need to explain anything about them. They've been studying the South African energy market for some time. But what they don't know is the local environment. Perhaps most in particular, they don't know South African companies, their clients. And so I think what attracted them to me is I could learn quickly about the energy business, having studied it. But most importantly, perhaps I know a bit at least about what it's like to be a CEO in South Africa, running a big company who's at least needing an agenda item these days about what am I doing about energy. I mean, shareholders are asking CEOs these days, what are you doing about energy? What are you doing about load shedding? What are you doing about sustainable energy?
But other issues immediately crop up in South Africa. So one of them is relationships with the government, relationships with Eskom, if you're going to dovetail with the power grid, black empowerment.
Yes, these are all important issues. And again, they're the things that I can help the US NRG guys understand. And you're right, it's a complex relationship. This is a big capital item. It's a very long-term business. And the interrelationship between regulation and commercial opportunity and black economic empowerment is important. But the DOE, the Department of Energy, I think has led well. The South Africa has one of the most successful renewable procurement programs in the world called REAP. And in there, very well defined, is exactly how to deal with all these trade-offs of local procurement, investment to communities, and black economic empowerment. So I think they've set the benchmark, and that's the sort of stuff that's attracted the foreign investors here.
And as you say, this gets less attention than the load shedding, but there is stuff going on which is interesting. Is it possible that by the time Medupi and Kusile are ever finished, if they are finished, that some part of their generating capacity will be redundant because of all these initiatives?
I'm not sure that's the case. So certainly it's true that when they're up and running, load shedding should disappear. That's if the South African consumption doesn't grow too much. But that, I think, is a good thing. I think load shedding is distracting CEOs today from perhaps the longer term issues, which are about clean energy and hedging against energy prices increasing. Because if you just look at the current costs, they're going up fast. And if we introduce carbon tax, any CEO should be worried about their electricity or broader energy costs. And so I think we're going to help the CEOs solve their load shedding problems, but then we want to move that agenda on to costs and renewables.
You're chairman of this new company. It sounds like you'd be quite an executive chairman, or certainly hands-on in many ways.
Yes, certainly it's my intention. It's small. It can't afford lots of people, so I'm both chairman and CEO. We've got a nice small team now of 10 or 11 people. So I will carry on running it, but perhaps one day when it's a bit bigger, we'll start bringing in succession and opportunities.
Sounds
for
like you're
CEOs.
going to enjoy it. Maybe you'll go back to Guy Hayward, who was your Chief Financial Officer at Massmart and then succeeded you. I mean, this is the kind of thing I presume you're going to do. Massmart's got lots of big roofs. So is that the kind of thing you're going to do? Knock on doors and say, right, let's talk about your energy needs and let me show you what we can offer.
I think the big opportunities, the industries which will attract our attention, of course, retail. They've got lots of roofs. Shopping center owners, property owners, as you were talking about, they're certainly used to this long-term business. Mining companies and FMCG manufacturing. Those are my headline industries to go and target. Fortunately, as a retailer, you get to know a lot of these people. So they'll at least take one phone call from me. And I'll get into the office once. I've done about twice.
And listing down the line?
Yes, this is certainly in our plans. Perhaps not to list the development company, this thing we call NRG Renew Africa, but there's an interesting vehicle that works in America called a yield co. And it's very much like a property fund, a REIT here in South Africa. So if we could amass enough megawatts that would make an interesting investment opportunity in this thing called a yield co, we certainly would attempt to move in that direction.
What a fascinating story for you, and good to see you again, having gone from retail back into electrical engineering, which I suppose is what it is. That's the Executive Chairman of NRG Renew Africa. Sounds funny because Grant Pattison was the Chief Executive of Massmart, his new venture.